we're just going to be getting started in just a few minutes. And I just wanted to introduce a few of our UNIA, or Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League officers from the highest rank to lowest rank. So if I could introduce Brother Shaka Barak, who is our Minister of Education and also third Assistant President General in the back here. Also, we have our illustrious, tireless, hardworking sister, Sister Mary Bota, the Secretary General, who is keeping all of our divisions worldwide on their toes, and she has been working tirelessly. And we'll hear more about her background and work with the UNIA. Also, Brother Victor Betts, who is our Vice President, right here. Our Treasurer, Dr. Scott. Dr. Bob Scott here, and I think in the back we've got a few others. I can't see them right now, but we will be bringing them up throughout the program. So if we could just get a couple of more minutes and we'll be back. Thank you.
I commit my body, mind, and spirit to the protection, defense, and security of the red, black, and green. I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa and the liberation of her scattered black children. I accept for myself and my descendants the teachings of universal African nationalism and promise that our children will be instilled with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people in order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail until all black people are free and united through one God, one aim, one destiny. Thank you.
At this time, we're trying to move the program along fairly quickly. If, Bill, you want to set up, I want to give an introduction to our keynote speaker, someone I've known for probably 6 or 7 years now. I've known her to be very sharp, specifically with statistics and a sense of Garveyism. She can give Garvey history better than most people that I know that have been in the organization for 30, 40 years. She's very sharp and keenly aware of our history. And that has helped her in her new roles. And what I would like to do is to read a bit from her biography. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Just a minute. Okay. Which is also in our program, Sister Cecile Johnson. She is the CEO and founder of the African Development Plan, or ADP, whose vision is a united African continent working closely with its diaspora to create and implement a 50-year comprehensive development plan that will usher in an African renaissance for the global African community. She's also co-founder and consultant of JPPC, LLC, a planning and development firm that provides consulting services in community transformation, leadership development, community planning, and sustainable development. JPPC utilizes a community-based approach centered around the Black agenda, the J&P framework for rapidly implementing the community agenda, and a human rights approach to self-determination. Cecile is Secretary of the Board for the National Black Agenda Consortium in Chicago and co-author of the 2017 National Black Agenda. Of course, she is also a member of the UNIA Division 429. Website also nbacchicago.org. Cecile is an African-centered researcher and scholar focused on self-determination solutions for Afro-descendant people locally and internationally. She calls what she does connecting the dots, using comprehensive data in a user-friendly way. And I think we can all appreciate that, making a difficult subject simplified. Otherwise, the more you obfuscate the message, people are just going to go over their head. So I love the way that she is able to do that. Her work is centered on educating and empowering formerly colonized people to understand the system that disenfranchised them, while actively working to remove the barriers to their growth and economic development. She was also a research associate with the Mandela Institute for Development Studies on the African Heritage Project, which sought to develop a better understanding of what defines Africans by researching various aspects of Africa's heritage and determining its relevance for the African development agenda. I know she just came back from Ghana a few weeks ago and traveled through Jamaica this year and China this year. Or was that last year? It's rolling by so fast. I get confused. I'm so sorry. Her role includes input on the survival of diaspora communities with a focus on historiography and a reform of educational systems and curriculum transformation, and the need for a long-term strategy and plan for Africa's renewal and renaissance, and the role of the African diaspora in this alternative project of society and civilization. Her research for this project covered towards the African-centered curriculum and the teaching and learning of history. Her background in education includes a UN-certified human rights defender. She's going to bring some of that to us today. American Institute of Human Rights, a Master's in Inner City Studies from Northeastern Illinois University, Dr. Jacob Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies here in Chicago. The Bachelor's in Communications from Florida Gulf Coast University. Without further ado, I'd like to bring up our sister, Cecile Johnson.
Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
It's an honor to be here today because I got some real exciting news for you. As Clyde says, I have 3 hats. I'm with the National Black Agenda, I'm with African Development Plan, and I'm with the American Institute of Human Rights, and everything is all joined together. So, today we're going to talk about nation building on international law. And the reason we're going to do that is because some exciting things are happening, right? I'll be in DC next month, and we're going to the UN. So let me tell you what's going on, because I need you to be involved. Bill? Oh, okay. Okay, so self-determination is an ancient concept, as you know, right? To define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. And the Honorable Marcus Garvey talked about action, self-reliance, the vision of self, and the future have been the only means by which the oppressed have seen and realized the light of their own freedom. So this is what you all do, right? This is what we do. Marcus Garvey also says, a people without the knowledge of their past, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. So, some of you have forgotten. You see that crowd there? That was 125,000 people. That's what the New York Times said. So you know it was more than that, right?
Right.
Because anytime they say something and we do something big, they downsize the numbers.
Right.
Right? So that was in 1920s. This is the kind of crowd that Marcus Garvey was able to pull, right? And some of you forgot that in 1920, when they had that big convention, 1 month long, right? This is when folks were serious. They came together, 25,000 of them at Madison Square Gardens, and they met for a month, right? Up at Freedom Hall up in Harlem. And they came up with a Declaration of Rights of the Negro People of the World. This was in response to soldiers coming back after World War I and having to fight for that democracy and then come back and people are lynching them and burning them and killing them, right? Same thing happening today. So this document was one of the first human rights documents, right? The most complete document advocating human rights and detailing the abuses against black people worldwide. It also sought the upliftment of the black race and encouraged self-reliance and nationhood. So I would encourage you to read that document, right? Because it's 1920, and we are almost 100 years later, and we're still doing this thing. I know the ancestors are not happy. So, per the racial wealth divide, the history of Chicago is one of access, right? Chicago is the product of decades of policies that have isolated communities of color. So what I'm going to do is a little summary of the data because I have to be short here today. And what you see is that in Chicago, we are 31% of the population. This was a study done in last year, came out last January, so that means it's probably 2016, 2015 data. We're 31% of the population, but we have a medium household income, the lowest, as you see there, of every race, 30,303. We have a liquid asset poverty of 67% of our people have a liquid asset poverty, right? When it comes to zero net worth, 33% of our people have zero net worth, right? Home ownership, we have the lowest rate, 35%, and you know your home builds equity, right? So you have no home, you have no equity, and I'm going to tell you about what the government had done in the past to actually help whites to gain wealth. 8th grade reading level, 11% of them can read. But look, right below that, 81.9% of them are graduating. So tell me how that happened. Can't read, but you're graduating, right? So we have a lot of substandard young people graduating, and they know that. That way when they come, they can't fill out those applications, they can't go on and get more training, etc., because they're not prepared. That's our fault, right? Bachelor's degree or higher, 11.3, graduate professional 7%, unemployment rate 21%. But look at the white unemployment rate, 6%, right? Historically, our unemployment rate is always at least 2.5 times theirs, right? The last 60 years, so this ain't nothing new, right? Nothing has changed, okay? Now, the predictions that they have for us, as you can see from the racial wealth inequality, you have, look over the side, right? By 2024, whites will have 122,366, and we will have 1,633, right? Actually, the predictions are that by 2038, zero will be zero, right? So I don't know what they got planned for us, but it's something, right? They always have something planned for us. So the question is, how long does a dollar spend in your community? And most of the time, some people say it's 6 hours, right? In the Asian community, 30 days. The Jewish community, it's 20 days. And in the overall white community, 17 days, right? And how many black businesses, when you go down to Chinatown, how many black businesses you see down there, right? How many in the white community, huh? How many, right? And the Latino community, right? So these people practice in self-determination, but I don't know what we practice in. We practice in how to be a good consumer and spender because the dollar spends 6 hours in our community, right? That's part of our problem. That little chart to the side is Dr. Claude Anderson. He talks about the 5 steps of power, right? Economics, politics, legal, media, and then education. Because he who got the money buy, sell, rent, and lease the politicians, right? Who then make the rules and laws that they're persecuting us with now, right? Use the media to bombast it and also create that image of us, right? Where people are just shooting us in the street every day. And then the educational system reinforces the fact that the 13th Amendment says slavery has been abolished except you're incarcerated. So we're going to build that schoolhouse, the jailhouse pipeline, so you will be fulfilling what we need for you, right? So how was white wealth built? This is important, right? If you don't remember anything else, this is very important. White wealth. We used to think that it was just unfair practices, etc. But what we found out, there's a book that just came out last year in May called The Color of Law. And The Color of Law shows how the federal government subsidized the development of the suburbs on the condition that it only be sold to white families. Then the houses in those suburbs had deeds that prohibited resale to black people. Now this is important because there was a group over in Stanford where it was like 8 blacks in a group of people who came together and formed a co-op. And they bought land near Stanford and they wanted to build a subdivision. The government said, no, we will not allow that. So the people say, okay, well maybe if we just limit it to the proportionate amount of people in the state of California who are black, that would be fair, right? The government said, no, none. So those 8 people had to sell their land, right? And that subdivision was built. So you know they lost all of that wealth. Because houses that were sold for $8,000 in the 50s are now selling for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, right? $300,000 to $400,000. So that is $200,000 to $300,000 in asset. If I got that, I can form a business, right? If I have that, I can send my children to school, right? If I have that, I can do stuff in my community because I can pull that money out and then I write it off on my taxes, right? Yo, this is a hookup. We missed out on the hookup, right? So that's why when you see the black wealth of 4,900 in 2010 and the white wealth at 97,000, which is 1/19 I don't make these numbers up. I love data. This is real. That's how it happened, okay? So your government helped to segregate because they were integrated, people living in poverty. Then there was a push to get more housing coming out of World War II. And what they did is they created the suburbs for the white people, and the rest of the place was for you. Then they defunded the inner cities, and you see the mess we got now. So poverty is a major issue, right? Blacks have a 24% poverty rate nationally. Some places have 30. If I had longer time, I'd show you that. But in Illinois, we have a 28.2% poverty rate. And if you come to the city of Chicago, it's 1 in 3 black people, right? 10% of white Chicagoans are living under the poverty rate. Just to show you the contrast, 1 in 3 of us are living under the poverty rate. Okay, taxation without appropriate representation. This is the Congress that they just got voted in, right? 39.1% of the population is people of color, and yet we only have 21.6% of the House of Rep, and we got 10% of the Senate. Them senators sit there for 6 years, you know. You understand? So do you understand why nothing comes down to us? Because we don't have no representation, right? Black people have 10.5% of the, they have 46 congressmen, and they got 3 senators. We are 13% of the population. We should at least have 13, right? Okay. So in 2016, the UN was here, and some of you participated. We were down at Chicago State, and I'm telling you, the place turned out. They had to move us out in the hallway, right? And what they did is the UN working group said, because of the continued link between present injustices and the dark chapters of American history, that the US government owed the black population reparations, right? That's what they said. Then they also said to us that, listen, we can give reparations, we can talk all about all of this, but y'all on the ground got to do something, right? So we on the ground been doing something. This is from the findings. The working group acknowledges that federal civil rights legislation put in place in the 60s and 70s has had a positive impact by redressing individual and even institutional cases of racial discrimination. However, here in the testimonies of African Americans in different parts of the country, the working group is concerned about the implementation of laws, right? From 1964 till now, right? They're worried about the implementation of the laws not being sufficiently effective to overcome and transform the structural racial discrimination against African Americans. The complex organizational structure of the legal system, with the independence of federal, state, and county jurisdictions and the lack of direct applicability of international human rights laws and policies, create gaps that impact deeply on the human rights of African Americans. So basically, you'll find that the working group is concerned that international human rights treaties cannot be invoked in national courts. This is very important, right? As in most cases, there's no enabling legislation, and they have been declared non-self-executing. When an international law is signed, if we ratify it with our Senate, then it is supposed to be applied to us here. So it's supposed to then have a federal, have a state, a county, a municipal law that goes right along with it, right? The United States has not really done that. This is now 2016, the UN is talking. So when you look, the US has signed about 17 of the treaties, and you'll be surprised some of the ones that they haven't signed. Even the rights of the child has not been signed, even though the optional protocol has been, right? I mean, has been signed but not ratified. So what's the difference between human rights and civil rights? Because some of you are some big civil rights people, right? Human rights are those rights that an individual enjoys because he's a human. It's your God-given rights. While civil rights are those defined by virtue of citizenship, right? Because that's why they have those laws, make changes in the amendments in the Constitution, etc. Not that anything happens after, but hey. So, observable residues of African Holocaust victims. I call it the Ma'afo, but I got this from Salmela Abdullah, right? She says, today, what you see in our communities is a lack of knowledge about history, culture, worldview, religion, and self. We have poor self-image, the evaluation of dark skin and their natural hair, placing high value on light skin and flat straight hair, alienation from themselves and the community evaluation, evaluate self and community based on European standards, right? Over-identification with their oppressors. And this is through this education system that we have. Sometimes black people cannot even take themselves out of it in defining a problem, right? That they include in we like they're part of the we. You're not. You're not in the outcomes. Imitation and modeling behavior of their oppressors, creating black people who practice internal racism. And we have a lot of unrewarding personal relationships that carry over from enslavement, right? We practice self-destructive behavior by taking out our frustration and anger about racism on self and those who represent self in the community. And then when it comes to our leaders, these are usually people who are named and sanctioned by the people in charge, right? Genuine leaders are killed, as we saw that massive killing that went on in the 60s, right? Malcolm, Martin, Edgar, here in Chicago, right? All across the country. I've met with people who have told me that was just, you haven't heard half the story about the people who were killed. And then you have a community, a victim of divide and conquer, right? And then religious images prepare them to worship whites in general. So you see a lot of that. This is the residual behavior of an African Holocaust. They use the word Holocaust, but I call it Ma'afa. Ma'afa is the last 500 years that we've been under. That is our great suffering, because we still are suffering till, right? Some of you won't hear my Jamaican accent come out sometimes, but I get real excited. So, in 1995, Jewel Cato and her family went to court and requested reparations for all African descendants. And what the court found was that discrimination and bigotry of any type is intolerable, and the enslavement of Africans by this country is inexcusable. This court, however, is unable to identify any legal cognizable basis upon which plaintiff's claims may proceed against the United States. Right? While plaintiff may be justified in seeking redress for past and present injustices, it's not within the jurisdiction of the court to grant the requested relief. The legislature, rather than judiciary, is the appropriate forum for plaintiff's grievances. Right? How convenient, right? So you're going to send it to the white nationalist government legislature, who has hardly ratified enough of these human rights treaties, much less enforced the laws that have already been passed, right? This is good. Why is this good? Because doing international law, in order for us to take a case to the World Court, in the court in Costa Rica, we have to show, one, we have juridical identity as a people, so I'll show you what that is, and two, that we have exhausted domestic remedies. So even though those things were not good, they're good. They're good because we've shown that we've tried to go through the domestic courts and they have failed, right? So 2017, we began the process for self-determination, right? From civil rights to human rights and self-determination, that is the path that we are on. We are 44 million people, and we have countries that are smaller than us and they're self-determined. Political power must bring fairness to how resources are allocated for the black community. In Chicago, you have TIF funds that are put out there, and yet we never get any, right? We get 4 million and we're going, whoopee, and they're getting 4 billion, and we think that's an achievement, right? We have the same fighting over the same rights about voting. They have ways to steal the election through gerrymandering, where you can have a majority actually become the minority through the gerrymandering, right? And the one-drop rule still persists. In today, black people are at the bottom of the pile still, right? So, African descendants are colonized people. They all agree? We colonize, right? The U.S. courts and U.S. attorneys have rejected various reparation claims based on sovereign immunity, means you can't sue the United States, lack of standing, and statute of limitations. Oh, your ancestors are 1865. What you talking about? That's what they say. What you talking about? It's been 150 years. Come on. But we have been colonized many times. Why? Because many of the African descendants here didn't just come through the 388,000 that came through slavery, right? Black people was here before. They were here. They've always been here. And this is, we were part of the 4th or 5th migration. And we know, we have evidence of that, right? So, and then we were colonized about 5 times. Because as you can see, the first one that came was France, right? Then we had Spain, the British, Netherlands, right? And Sweden was here. And then in 1776, when the white nationalists took over, right? We're still colonized by them, right? So, given that we were indigenous people also, then all these other occupations were colonization, right? So, the process of nationhood is what the colonialists in America did in 1776, right? The steps that the African descendant will have to take will be somewhat similar, but different in one aspect. By 1776, you had all this widespread talk of liberty, and it gave thousands of slaves high expectations, but many were ready to fight for a democratic revolution. But by 1776, it had become clear that the revolutionary rhetoric of the founding fathers, I call some of them the founding fathers, right, did not include enslaved blacks. The Declaration of Independence promised liberty for all men, but failed to put an end to slavery. And although they had proven themselves in battle, the Continental Congress adopted a policy of excluding black soldiers from the army. So what did that Continental Congress do? They had the Declaration of Independence, 1775. They had a War of Independence, 1775 to 1783. Then they had a Continental Congress. We came up with Articles of Confederation. And then they had a Constitution in 1789. So that's a process. That's a process that you do when you're building a nation. So we got three political approaches to government, right? Black nationalists, we focus on self-determination, right? Some people want to repatriate, right? You want to return to Africa. But the white nationalist, the member of the Democratic and Republican Party, I think it's safe to say that, right? Because the laws and things that are happening don't impact us and actually make our life any better. So what we are a minority in a majority hostile state. And we're non-self-governing. So there's some key things you need to understand. There's such a thing as a national minority, an immigrant minority, and a social minority. National minorities are the Chicanos, us, Native Americans, right? Who were here at the forming of the country, right? Immigrant minorities are people who come into the country knowing that this is the country and they didn't put a gun to their head, so they came and they are willing to go along with the program. Then you have your social minorities, the gays, the disabled, and women. So defined because of their non-dominant position, right? Those people are also included in these two other groups, right? So we're not leaving anybody out. Do not figure within the configuration of national or ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities protected by international minority laws, right? However, other human rights laws apply to them. Well, why is this important? Because what you've seen over the last few years is that social minorities and immigrant minorities have more rights than the national minorities, right? That's what you've seen happen to us. So, for those who doubt that 42 million people should be self-determined, let's look at the Europeans. Now, Europe has 7% or less of the total landmass, right? And less than 1/10 of the world's population. And that's when they swing it, because sometimes they include Russia's numbers in there, right? And the Russians are Eurasians, right? And then they have 25% of the countries at the UN. They have about 50 countries. We have 195 countries, 193 that can vote, right? Now, some of these countries, 41 of these countries have less people than we do. So obviously they understand what self-determination is, right? One country even have 32,104 people. So black people, 42 million of us, what is going on here, right? So what is nation building? Nation building is is the unification of the people within the state so it remains politically stable and viable in the long run. And what's really important is this: the state as a person in international law. In order for the state, the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of a State says that the state as a person has to have the following qualifications. This is very important. You got to have a permanent population. You have to have a defined territory. You have to have a government, and you have to have capacity to enter into relations with other states. That capacity is actually the most important thing, right? So how does this apply to us? We have a permanent population, right? How big is the population depends on us. Well, we got 42 million people, right? Then you have to sign the Declaration of Self-Determination. We signed one last October, and what we're doing across the country is collecting signatures from the different groups. We call them the tribes. So we got the Black Indians, the Moors, Black lawyers, different groups coming on board, right? That's what we're doing right now. That's why I tell you this is exciting. It's very exciting, right? So we're going to be defined as African descendants. Once we do that, we are now actually in a declaratory nation status. This gives us a juridical identity. Juridical identity is a legal term, right? That means that you're defined as a human being, authorized by law with duties and rights, recognized as a legal authority having a distinct identity. Without a juridical identity, we can't go to court. We now have authority to form an interim government. Remember what the United States did? When they first came together and they formed their Declaration of Independence, this is not what we're doing. We're doing a Declaration of Self-Determination. They then formed a Congress, right? They formed a Congress. So we then have to do an interim government and has the right to hold a plebiscite vote within a reasonable time. And then we create a criteria for leadership. Then we hold a vote, right? Because you build your nation by consent. You are members of the UNIA because you agreed to and pay your dues, right? So you build a nation by consent. You need to take the entire population and give them an opportunity to join us. So over the next a year and a half, we will be marketing this to the public to let them know that this is where we're moving, right? So we're going to take us from declaratory nation to a constitutional government, because once we have a plebiscite vote and the people have said yes, then now we can form a constitution, right? So we need to increase our numbers because this increases our wealth. As you know, your birth certificate is tied to what? Your wealth, right? The wealth of the nation. So that 42 million plus of us, that's money for us when we value our nation. And then we're going to tie this into the UN group's recommendations. And the bottom line is that the UN group says, hey, we can make these recommendations, we can give you a public platform, but y'all got to do something for yourself. So we've been doing something for ourselves. Now, the second element is a defined territory, right? So these are the types of states that they are. This country is a state. Illinois is a state, right? The county of Cook is a state, right? And the municipality of the city of Chicago is a state, right? So the way they use these terms are very broad. So what you got to do? You got to define your territory. Get out your red pen and circle. And I already did that. See them areas over there? That's where the majority of black people live, in the city of Chicago, right? So you begin to draw borders and boundaries, and then you look at the cities with black mayors. They're usually black mayors because they are majority black, right? So these are our areas. Then we have to form a government. What's a government? The active process of governing, right? So then you form a government, the officials comprising the governing body of a political unit and constitute the organization of an active nation. You all know what a government is. We got them all over the place, right? Then you have to decide what type of government it's going to be, whether you're going to have one like England or we have one like the United States, right? And it would be a federal government. So look, in a federal government, what you have there is, we would be like the ones on the side. Powers reserved to states. So the United States will still hold all those powers, be able to declare war, create and maintain the armed force, establish foreign policy, etc. And we will have the right to establish a local government, establish and maintain schools, regulate trade within our states, conduct election, and provide for public safety. We can raise taxes, all those things in the middle, right? Listen, they do that right now. For those of you who don't understand, the United States is a confederation. There's 50 states within the United States who agreed. And each state has its own constitution and its own laws, right? You can be in Alabama, went to jail and come out and never vote again. Or you can live in Rhode Island and be in jail and vote. So I'm not telling you anything that does not already exist. It's just that we have cut out civics in many of our schools, so we don't understand how the government runs, right? So this is nothing new. So we would have that joint responsibility. So sovereignty. Sovereignty, without sovereignty, no state can exist. Remember I told you, we have to be recognized by other people. Now, isn't it ironic that when the United States declared its independence, the first state to recognize it was Morocco, an African nation? Did you know that? That's why the Moors are here, right? They know their history. It's just the rest of us who are a little bit not caught up. So the Confederation will be a free association insular state. And what exactly does that mean? A non-self-governing, this is the UN General Assembly Resolution 1541, right? So everything we do is according to law, right? We are making up nothing. Principle 6 says, a non-self-governing territory can be said to have reached a full measure of self-government by emergence as a sovereign independent state. That's what that place in Spain tried to do the other day. That's an act of war. If we were to declare independence, that would be an act of war. We're not declaring independence, we're declaring self-determination, right? So we're going to be having a free association with an independent state. The independent state would be the United States. And the Native Americans who are here already have these types of agreements with the United States, right? And so the Confederation will seek a compact of free association with the United States so that it will be self-governing. So, right now, we've been integrated. When 1865 came and they made that little choice about the 13th Amendment, right? Did any of you sit at the table? Did any of your ancestors sit at the table? So they made that choice. When they came out of that choice, what should have happened was you had three choices. You should have been able to, one, integrate, which is what they forced us to do because we didn't have a choice. Or two, repatriate. Those who wanted to go away to Africa could have. Or three, set up your own nation. Right? But as usual, people like to make rules and laws, and we never sit at the table. right? That's how come Africa got colonized, because we didn't sit at that table there either, right? So integration, extreme, to independence. To have independence would be an act of war. We're going for the middle, free association, so that we can be self-determined, so that we can begin to control the areas that we're in, and we can begin to bring life back to our communities, right? So, how the federation will be funded? Everybody always wants to know where the money comes from. Right now, money comes down through the state government, and then to us. In our capacities, right? Within our cities and states. But through the Confederation, it will go from federal government to the Confederation. Similar to how it goes to the Native Americans, right? Because they were slick to make y'all think you weren't Native Americans, but you are, right? And again, these are things that we can prove in our legal case. We've been doing a whole heap of research. And we will use your birth certificate and the land we have to access to reconfigure our economics. We'll be able to issue government bonds, and action will enhance our quality of life, right? So we'll be having conferences in the future where the experts will be coming together to value us. So the transition period, right? Create government bonds, will be sold, and recipient will be our federal government and bank. We're actually going to be forming a bank too. And this is going to improve our quality of life. Our government will utilize the UN Development Assistance Framework. Again, we ain't making nothing up, folks, right? And this is address historical context, who we really are, because a lot of our people have identity crisis. We're going to deal with democracy and human rights, economic development, trade, investments and job creation, peace and security, education and culture, and sustainable development, quality of life, and the environment. So, Marcus Garvey says, until you produce what the white man has produced, you will not be his equal. And right now we are producing one thing, right? Shame on us. 100 years now, I know he's rolling in his grave because I feel the energy. And when I'm doing this work, I feel the ancestor, right? Because this is crazy. For him to have gone through all of that, have all them thousands of people, 6 million people globally, 5 continents, that's who Marcus Garvey had. They found that to be true, right? So this is not figment of our imagination. And look at where we are today. So we're going to restore the power of the UNIA. As you see these crowds, those are the kind of crowds we need, right? We're 42 million people. Come on now. So how does this impact the UNIA? You can use international human rights law to benefit you and your organization. The UNIA needs to finish what the Honorable Marcus Garvey started, right? You need to take the plebiscite and go through the steps. You need to declare indigenous status, because you actually are. Indigenous status is important because indigenous status gives you a whole bunch of other rights, including the right to your land and your resources that the people stole from us, right? The UNI should be filing paperwork with the Decolonization Committee. What is this Decolonization Committee? In 1960, in the 1950s, the Asian and the Africans were meeting in Asia, and they were talking about their independence. Some of them had been fighting, for the colonialists in World War II, and part of the agreement was that, hey, we're going to give you some freedom when you come out, right? So they was like, yeah, let's move this agenda now. So in 1960, the UN had a Decolonization Act, Declaration of Decolonization. And what it said was that every country in the world who had a colonized people was to declare them and put them on a list. Well, y'all was living in apartheid then, weren't you? In a colonial state, right? And the US did not put you on the list. So what we're doing next month is we will be going to the UN, and we will be requesting to be put on the decolonization list, right? To remedy what had not happened because the United States failed to do that in 1960. And by not doing that and treating us as if everything was fine and dandy, and today we see the state of us, right? In 2050, the US Census already predicts that we will be 11.8% of the population. We're over 13% now. That means we'll see no growth. The Latino population at the time will have doubled, right? So what happened to us? We're under genocide. And I like to use real words. We are under genocide. I didn't show you half the data, but I will be producing this in another way, a book that gives you the baseline data when we start this process of what's happening with us, so you understand. So that when you get up to talk about what has to happen to you, I'm dealing with facts, right? I don't deal with hearsay, I deal with facts. And that's why I tell you I get excited about data, because the data is helping us. I'm not just crunching the numbers for, to feel good. I'm crunching the numbers because we're going to use this to move our people forward. So, UNIA members, some of you want to go back to Africa, so you can get 4 passports. Think about that. You still keep your U.S. citizenship, so for those who getting all your, benefits, etc., you don't lose that, right? You have your UNIA passport, right? And some of us, Africa, Ghana gave out dual citizenship the other day to a number of people from the diaspora, right? And so you would still have a U.S. passport, and the Confederation will have its passport. So you're not losing anything. In fact, you want to gain something, right? You're going to gain your freedom. And now, instead of us constantly fighting with these people on what we're going to do, we are now focused on what we're going to do for ourselves, right? It's a whole different energy. I work 24/7 because I am not focused on fighting them. I'm focused on how we going to improve us. It's a difference in your energy, right? One beats you down, one lifts you up. So, we are... Marcus Garvey says, we're going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery because whilst others might free the body, none but ourselves can free our mind. And so what I'll be asking you today is we need your signature to birth our nation, right? We have formed at the Institute, the American Institute has put together, called Declared Consent for Self-Determination and Request for Decolonization. The declared consent for self-determination is because we have a declaration of self-determination, similar to a declaration of independence. However, we're not declaring independence, we're declaring self-determination, a right to run our own communities, take care of ourselves, run our schools. All them police, they got to move, man, get up out of here, right? Take care of that. Take care of our health, right? And our infrastructure. We can't be in a city where we were 40% and get 12%, 8% of the contracts. Come on now. Right? You need to control what's going on in your community. That's what everybody else does. And they look at us and think we're some fools because we are not doing that. So you can sign on as an individual or for your family, right? And you can sign on as an organization. So that is what the exciting news I came to tell you here today. So what do you think?
All right. Thank you. At this point, we'd like to begin bringing up our distinguished and beloved honorees. First off, I'd like to have a presenter, Sister Tina Scott, come forward. And she will introduce the first few honorees. Got a little warm in here, ladies. I see some fanning going on. Does anyone need any water or anything? Something to quench your thirst? Raise your hand. So if we can have maybe 4 waters to come up. Thank you, Brother Lamont. Yes. I think that one's insulated. We might not be able to do that over there. This one is. All of them. One's in the tank. About that. She's making her way to the front. Another one of our members who just works tirelessly in support of the organization and our community. Scott Tax Service on the west side. So they've been keeping people's books together, our businesses. So yeah, we love it. Tina.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So the first person I would like to introduce to you is a very special lady. She does wonderful things for the community, for people in general, and I'm honored to know her and to be a part of her life. And I'm just going to give you a little bit about what she does. Darnell Law started Life Foundation, Inc., NFP, in September 2013. The initial purpose was to mentor troubled youth. It has been that and more. Life has been a support system for some grieving families, provides school supplies, scholarships to help further education, and annual community cleanup to help senior citizens with their exterior of their homes, and gardening to encourage healthier living. Someone asked her, "What qualifies you to do that?" And her answer was, "My journey qualifies me." She became a motherless child at the age of 7. She lived with her grandmother for 10 years, where she never felt wanted. She was physically and verbally abused in the home, inappropriately touched by a teacher as well as an owner of a business where she was working. She heard someone say life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you deal with it. With her 90%, she was an honor student, kindergarten through college. She received 2 opportunities to skip grades, but only was permitted 1. Purchased and rehabbed several properties, first one of 30 at 30 years old, owned and operated a small construction company, and have a successful career with a major airline. And lastly, she's a proud mother of a wonderful son. She has one question for you, and that is, what are you doing with your 90%?
All right.
I bring to you Darnell Law.
Thank you, Tina. First and foremost, thank God.
Yes.
Because without my God, our God, I am not standing here doing or accomplishing anything. To this wonderful organization that put this together, thank you for not only recognizing other things that happen, but recognizing the women who do what we can and above what we can to try and help our communities. I started that organization to give us something better, to help us. I didn't create it as a teaching presented to them, but I gave them more of a fun organization where I get down and dirty in that garden with them to teach them something better of how to garden and have their own food as opposed to getting substandard food. Right. We provide scholarships so that they can further their education, because often we don't have enough money to go to school. I became that motherless child and know what it feels like to be abandoned. Know what it feels like not to have that support system. So I wanted to be a difference and give somebody something that I did not have. I thank everybody that has come out today to support me, my sister, my sisters, my God sisters, I can call them, my family in the back. I thank you all because you are a part of my 90. That 10% did not change that 90. It helped to lift that 90. Thank each of you for being that 90 to me. Because without you, I'm not that 90. I love you all. Thank you all who have come here today to honor us. Thank you.
Thank you. Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League presents its 10th annual Women's Day Unsung Shero Award, Certificate of Appreciation to Darnell Law. We, the undersigned officers of the UNIA ACL Division 429 Chicago, give you this award on the 25th day of March 2018.
Thank you.
The next person, I nominated these 2 women because I love them and I thought that they deserved it. And they do a lot for other people. This young lady that I'm going to bring to you now has worked untiringly, even in her illness. She continued to work. And I'm going to read just a small section of her bio. Evangelist Michelle Wheeler began her journey in the Lord in 1977 at age 7 at Original Providence Baptist Church under the leadership of Pastor Edgar Thornton. She was on the Junior Nurses Board, the Ushers Board. She was baptized and she sang in the choir. At age 14, she accepted Christ. In 1989, at 19, she joined New Revelation Faith Church, under the leadership of Corinthian Robinson. She was on many boards at that church as well. She became a minister soon after at the House of Prayer Church of God in Christ in 2006 under the leadership of Dr. Lincoln Scott, who's now no longer with us. She served in several capacities, including the Vice President of the Pastor's Aid, the Vice President of Home and Foreign Mission, the President of YWCC Young Women Christian Council, Purity President, Pastor's Anniversary Chairperson, Teenage Parenthood Ministry President. She volunteered at Circle Urban Ministries Homeless Shelter for Women and Children under the Executive Director of Charlena Cooper. In 2016, she worked at Hope House Homeless Shelter for Men and Women and served as Administrative Assistant, Office Manager, Boy Scout, Girl Scout Leader, Community Service Supervisor, and Liaison for the Homeless Participant Needs. I'm going to stop reading this because that doesn't tell who Michelle is.
All right.
Michelle has given her life to help people. If you call her, she'll come. She took ill some years ago. Even in her illness. Michelle, can you come over here, please? This young lady, the doctor gave her up. Said there's nothing else they could do for her. She continues with her faith in God because she said God promised her life. Yeah. And she doesn't care what the doctor says. Right. And she continues to go. If you call her, she going. If you need her help, she's going to do it. And she wrote that because I asked her to write a bio, but that's not who she is. Those are titles. Her heart is who she is. She'll help anybody. She's helped Dr. Scott. She's helped me. She's helped Dr. Scott that passed. She does whatever anybody asks her to do. Sick. How many of us can say we'll do the same thing? Well, she never says no. Beautiful. And so I wanted her to be honored today because she deserves it. And she's never been honored. Never asked for anything in return. And I wanted to do this for her. So I present to you Evangelist Michelle Wheeler.
First, I'd like to give honor to God, who's the head of my life. Without him, I would be nothing. I would not be able to do anything. He gives me the strength to go on day by day. I thank God for placing in my heart, even as a young child, to help people. I realized that was my calling when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I just had the heart to just want to help anybody. Anytime I seen someone with a need, I would always try my best to fit that need. And I just thank God for Sister Tina and Dr. Scott. I thank God for all of my family and friends that showed up to support me on today. I'm very grateful for this organization who decided to take a time out to push me to go a little bit further. Like Sister Tina said, it's not about getting accolades from me. It's not about receiving good remarks. It's all about hard work. Right. Because I believe if you put your heart into whatever that you're doing, you'll be successful. So I just want to say that I'm grateful and I am humble for this opportunity. Thank you.
This award is presented to you. Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League presents its 10th Annual Women's Day Unsung Shero Award, Certificate of Appreciation to Michelle Wheeler. We, the undersigned officers of the UNIA ACL Division 429 Chicago, give you this award on the 25th day of March 2018. Oh, sorry.
That's my mama, y'all. All right. Biography of Teresa Turner. Teresa Turner has been walking with the Lord for 31 years. She has been a faithful member at Living Word Christian Center for 23 years. Teresa received her license of ministry in 2012. All right, let's get that out of the way. Under the leadership of Pastor Bill Winston, Teresa currently resides in Chicago, Illinois, on the west side. I grew up on the west side. West side? Okay. All right, she has one son, Cedric Turner. Teresa currently works for General Parts Company in Chicago, Illinois. Her vision is to see all people healed and set free from all bondages. She serves in various areas of her ministry, such as the women's ministry, the pastoral care ministry, the prayer intercessory. And I'm telling you, if you know, we all have different beliefs and that sort of thing. I won't go there. But if you ever wanted some prayer and you ask this young lady, you're going to feel something. You're going to move. I have a brother that's ailing in Milwaukee, and they found some spots or something. And I told her, and she prayed on the phone. I just felt like something was shaking. She is phenomenal. And he called me today, by the way, Teresa. I know you're coming up here to tell you and everybody that's been praying for him, thank you. He's doing well. Yes. Okay. So prayer changes things. All right. So Teresa, that's what I was saying. Okay, I lost my spot. Okay. As well as singing in the choir of Living Word Christian Center, she currently is serving in the foundation ministry as a facilitator. Under the anointing of the Holy Spirit, she has seen blind eyes open. She has laid hands on the sick and cast out people's devils, demons, evil spirits, what you want to call them. Many have been healed of cancer and other diseases. Teresa continues to visit and pray for the sick in their homes as well as in hospitals. Teresa has ministered at the Cook County Jail and Taylorville Correctional Centers and has ministered in songs at weddings, funerals, conferences. She is committed to seeing people's lives change, and as a result of her commitment to God and using her to exploit her exploits for the kingdom of God. She is also a caregiver for her father. She has also been on a mission trip to Costa Rica spreading the gospel. In her free time, she loves traveling, spending time with her family and friends, going to the movies, bowling, and having fun. So she's a normal, everyday person that just got a spiritual gift. Let's bring on my beloved Teresa Turner. Absolutely. Lay some hands on me, sister. Your beautiful self. Oh, it's so good to see you. I'll let you. Oh, the song. We have a track. Do we have a track?
Don't worry about it.
Okay, she said don't worry about it. Well, I thought we wasn't queued up there. All right, my darling, I'll just move over.
And hello, I give all praise and honor to God. I just thank the Lord for giving me this opportunity. I thank the group that's given me this opportunity, not only me, but each and every woman and each and every person that is here. For one thing, I love praying for people. I love seeing people's lives change because I went through sicknesses and growing up. I was premature, born 2 pounds, growing in and out of the doctors and not knowing what was wrong with me. But when I grew up, I knew God had a plan for my life because the devil was out to kill me, okay? Amen? So when you see that you have went through so many things in your life, you don't want other people to go through those things. I know everyone feels the same way. If you're going through something so bad, and when you get through that situation, and when you see somebody else going through what you have went through, you are able to minister to them. Ain't that right? Right. Everybody know that. So I just want everyone to know that God gets the glory. I have seen people's lives change, people healed of all different kinds of diseases. It's not me. It's the God in me. It's Jesus that does the work inside of us. Amen?